It was a breezy Thursday morning at Jefferson Middle School in Birmingham, Alabama. The sun rose slow and steady, casting golden light across the cracked pavement where the school buses hissed to a stop. Doors swung open. Kids poured out like a flood, shouting, laughing, bumping backpacks, eyes scanning for friends. It was the same morning chaos, as always, but not for Trinity Hayes. She sat alone by the flagpole, her hands resting lightly on the wheels of her chair. She watched the crowd flow around her like water around a stone. Nobody said hi. Nobody stopped. They just moved past her like she wasn't even there. Trinity was 13, small for her age, quiet, the kind of girl most people didn't notice unless she was answering a question in class, which she always did with thoughtfulness and a spark in her eye. Her laughter, rare as it was, could warm even the coldest room. She had spina bifida and had been in a wheelchair her whole life, but that never kept her from trying, never stopped her from showing up. Still, it didn't stop others from being cruel. Camden Brooks was in 8th grade, big, loud, the school's star linebacker. He came from a family that had their name carved into the gym wall, generations of football glory. He was the kind of boy who didn't have to say anything mean. His smirks, his stares, his silence, they all said enough. And that morning, he said plenty. Trinity was almost to the ramp when Camden stepped in front of her. Two of his sidekicks, Hunter and Mike, flanked him. They didn't speak, just folded their arms and grinned like they were proud of something. Hunter leaned down and flicked the rim of Trinity's wheel. "You ever think about putting nitro boosters on this thing?" He chuckled. Trinity didn't answer. Her hands gripped the wheels tighter. Camden stepped forward. "Let's clear a path," he said. But he didn't move aside. Instead, he grabbed the front of her chair, and in one awful motion he tipped it backward. Trinity gasped, her arms flailed, her books scattered, and then, thud, she hit the ground. For a second everything froze. The students nearby, they all saw. Some gasped. A few looked away, but no one stepped forward. And then the laughter began. It wasn't loud, not at first. A few kids chuckled, covered their mouths. Others tried to pretend they didn't see. But Trinity saw. She lay on the pavement, her backpack half off, her elbows scraped, eyes staring up at the sky. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just whispered something to herself, something only she could hear. That's when someone finally moved. A girl had just stepped off bus 12. Amia Cross. She saw the whole thing, the fall, the laughter, Camden's stupid smirk as he high-fived Mike. And something inside her snapped. She pushed through the crowd like a wave, knelt down beside Trinity, helped her sit up, checked her arm. "You okay?" Trinity nodded once, jaw clenched tight. Then Amia stood up. She looked at Camden, her voice cutting through the silence like a lightning bolt. "Hey," she said, "you think that's funny?" Camden turned, eyebrows raised. "Mind your business," he muttered. But Amia didn't move. She stood straight. "It is my business," she said. The crowd shifted. Someone whispered. More kids stopped to watch. Camden smirked. "What are you going to do, lecture me? Are you her babysitter now?" Still, Amia didn't flinch. She helped Trinity back into her chair, stood beside her like a shield. And just then the hallway monitor finally showed up, late as usual, asking what had happened. But nobody spoke. The boys disappeared into the crowd. The monitor shrugged, and the moment passed, but something in the air had changed. Amia didn't scream, didn't shove, but in that moment, just by standing there, she showed more strength than anyone else around. And while Camden walked away with his head high, he didn't know yet. The story was only beginning. By lunchtime, the story had already spread. Whispers floated through the halls like dust in the sunlight. "Did you see what happened this morning?" Camden tipped over that girl's chair. And that other girl, Amia, she checked him. Most kids didn't say it out loud, but something about what they saw had stuck with them. It wasn't just the fall, it was the silence. The fact that no one helped, that no one said a word, until Amia did. Later that day, Jefferson Middle was buzzing for another reason too. The school's annual Unity Challenge was happening that afternoon. It was a big event. Every year, students from every grade competed in team-building games out on the back field. Relay races, obstacle courses, trust falls, and more. It was meant to bring the school together, to teach teamwork, inclusion, respect. But this year, it felt different. Amia had a plan. During homeroom, she walked straight up to Miss Carter, the teacher in charge of the Unity Challenge. "I want to compete," Amia said. Miss Carter looked up from her clipboard. "Okay, great. What event?" "I want Camden on my team," Amia said calmly. Miss Carter blinked. "Are you sure?" "I'm positive." The bell rang and the day marched on. But behind the scenes, Amia was pulling strings. Coach Ramirez helped her rearrange the team lists. By the time the last class ended and the students gathered outside, the sun was shining bright, the field freshly mowed, and the sound system blasting pop music across the grass. Teachers were setting up cones and stations. Parents lined the fences. Everyone was excited. And Camden was bored. He stood with Hunter and Mike wearing matching red t-shirts, arms crossed, sunglasses on, yawning like it was all beneath him. That is, until he saw who was walking toward them with the team clipboard in her hand. Amia. She didn't say much, just handed them their lanyards and said, "Let's do this." Camden raised an eyebrow. "So you're the team captain?" Amia nodded. "That's right," he scoffed. "Fine, just don't expect me to do a trust fall or whatever." But Amia wasn't worried about trust falls. She had something else in mind. She waited until the final event of the afternoon, the obstacle relay. Coach Ramirez announced it over the speaker. "One last challenge. Each team will race across the field in a series of obstacles, sprinting, climbing, crawling, and for the final leg, a wheelchair push." The crowd murmured. "A wheelchair?" Camden rolled his eyes. "Seriously?" Amia turned to him, calm as ever. "You're pushing her." He blinked. "What?" "You're pushing Trinity," she said, pointing to the far side of the field. Trinity sat there in her chair wearing a navy blue t-shirt, her scraped elbow now bandaged. Her expression was unreadable, calm, focused. Camden's jaw tightened. "She can't, she's the final runner," Amia interrupted. "The rules say one teammate has to ride and one has to push. That's the rule." Camden looked at Trinity, then back at Amia. He muttered something under his breath and turned away. Coach Ramirez blew the whistle. The relay began. Hunter sprinted the first leg, dodging cones. Mike took the next, climbing over a rope net. Amia crawled under a tunnel of mats, her heart pounding. And then it was Camden's turn. He jogged over to the wheelchair station, sweat dripping, chest rising and falling. Trinity was waiting. She didn't say a word, just handed him the baton. He grabbed the handles and started pushing. The course wasn't smooth. The grass was thick, uneven. There were bumps and curves. "Slow down," Trinity said once, her voice calm. "You're tipping the chair." Camden grunted, adjusted his grip, and kept going. And then they reached the final stretch. The crowd leaned forward, students, teachers, even the parents were standing now. Amia clapped. "Let's go, Trinity!" Trinity raised the baton high above her head as they rolled across the finish line. They won, and for a second, the field went quiet. Then came the applause. First from a teacher, then a student, then more. until the whole field was clapping, not out of pity, not because she was in a chair, but because they won, because they were strong. Trinity didn't smile, didn't wave. She just sat there, breathing hard, eyes forward, baton still in her hand. And Camden? He stood behind her, hands still on the chair grips, silent, no smirk, no swagger, just quiet. Maybe for the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. Later that same afternoon, as the last bus rolled away and the hallways fell quiet, Amia sat outside the main office, waiting. She had asked for a meeting with Principal Gaines and Miss Carter, not to get Camden suspended. No, that would have been easy. She wanted something more. When they called her in, Amia stood tall, eyes steady. Trinity sat beside her, calm as ever, her hands folded in her lap. "People saw what happened this morning," Amia began, her voice strong but respectful. "They saw a girl get knocked over, and nobody did anything. That's the real problem." Principal Gaines leaned forward. He was a broad man with kind eyes, gray streaks in his hair, and a face that looked like it had seen too many hard days. "What are you suggesting, Ms. Cross?" Amia took a breath. "Give us 10 minutes at tomorrow's assembly. Let us speak. Let us show the school what it means to stand for someone else." There was a pause. Miss Carter looked at Principal Gaines. He nodded once. 10 minutes, he said. Make them count. The next morning, the gym filled up like it always did for the monthly assembly. Kids slumped on the bleachers, whispering and half-listening as the principal read announcements, handed out Student of the Month awards, and gave his usual speech about character. But then, something changed. Principal Gaines cleared his throat. "Before we wrap up," he said into the mic, "2 of our students would like to share something important. I ask that you give them your full attention." There was a quiet ripple through the gym. Amia and Trinity rolled out onto the court. One walking, one riding, side by side. The bleachers fell silent. Not awkward silent, listening silent. Trinity parked her chair near center court. Amia stood beside her and took the microphone. "Most of you saw what happened yesterday," Amia began. "Some of you laughed, some of you looked away, and some of you just didn't care." She paused. "But here's the thing. Trinity didn't fall because she's in a wheelchair. She fell because someone thought it was okay to make her feel small." A few students shifted in their seats. Teachers exchanged glances. No one dared to speak. "We talk a lot about kindness here," Amia continued. "We put up posters, say the right things, but none of that matters if we stay silent when it really counts." She turned to Trinity, handed her the mic. Trinity's voice was soft, but it carried. "My name is Trinity Hayes," she said. "I've used a wheelchair my whole life, and most days, I don't think about it much." She glanced around the gym, her gaze steady. "But yesterday, I was reminded of what some people still see when they look at me." Her voice trembled just once. "They see weakness, a target, a joke." She gripped the mic tighter. "But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see the hours I've spent in therapy, the nights I taught myself how to get up after a fall, the way my mom works 2 jobs to keep me moving forward." She looked out over the sea of students. "They saw a girl in a chair." She paused. "But I want you to see a girl who got back up." The silence that followed was heavy, full, and then a clap, another, and then the gym erupted. Not with the kind of cheering that follows a touchdown, but something deeper. A standing ovation, not because of pity, because of respect. That afternoon, Camden walked the halls alone. He wasn't used to that. Usually kids nodded, high-fived, moved aside. But now, they looked at him differently. Not afraid, not impressed, just aware. He turned a corner near the library, stopped. There, sitting by the window, were Amia and Trinity, laughing, sharing a book. He hesitated, then slowly walked up. He scratched the back of his neck. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I was just messing around. I didn't think. Amia looked up. You didn't think, she repeated, calm, clear. That's the only part that matters. Camden turned to Trinity. I'm sorry, for real. I was being a jerk. Trinity studied him. Her voice was quiet, but sure. I forgive you, she said. But I don't need you to be sorry. Camden blinked. I need you to do better, she finished. He nodded awkwardly. Yeah, okay. He turned to leave, then paused. If you ever want help fixing that wheel, I'm pretty good with tools. Trinity gave the smallest shrug. We'll see. And as he walked away, something had shifted. By the end of that week, something began to change at Jefferson Middle School. It wasn't loud, it wasn't sudden, but it was real. Students who once passed by without a glance now stopped to hold open doors for Trinity. Some even sat with her and Amia at lunch. Others, kids who never used to say a word, started greeting them in the halls with shy smiles. Teachers began weaving new conversations into their lessons about accessibility, kindness, courage, and Principal Gaines. He didn't let the moment pass. He created something new, a monthly student forum. He called it The Circle, a place where students could talk honestly about what they faced, what they feared, what needed to change. At the very first meeting, it was Amia and Trinity who stood up to speak, their voices steady, their message clear. It wasn't about blame, it was about building better. And guess who showed up? Camden. He sat in the back, didn't speak, didn't fidget, just listened. Spring bloomed early that year in Birmingham. The scent of fresh grass hung in the air, sidewalks shimmered with heat, and in the middle of it all, Trinity rolled into the cafeteria one morning to find her favorite table already waiting for her. There was a note taped to the back of a chair, handwritten, reserved for Trinity and company. She didn't say a word, just smiled, not because she needed a table, but because, for the first time, people saw her for more than just the girl in a chair. She was Trinity, and she had risen. As the school year moved toward its final days, preparations began for the biggest event of the spring, the Jefferson Talent Showcase. It was a tradition. Dancers, singers, magicians, jokesters. But this year, something different was in the air. It wasn't just about wrapping up a semester. It felt like the school was closing a chapter. And at the center of that change were two girls who hadn't asked for permission to lead. They just did. One day, under the old magnolia tree, Amia turned to Trinity with an idea. We should do something for the showcase. Trinity's eyes widened. On stage? I've never... Amia leaned forward. You right. That poem you showed me, about the sky being fire, that was beautiful. Trinity shook her head. That was just for me. Maybe, Amia said, but maybe someone else needs to hear it too. So they began. 2 weeks, after school, in the library, crafting words, weaving their stories. They wrote about being invisible and being unavoidable, about silence that shouted, about rolling through life while others pretended not to see. Amia brought rhythm, fire, movement. Trinity brought depth, grace, power. They didn't rehearse to impress. They rehearsed to speak. The day of the showcase came. The gym was buzzing. Parents filled the bleachers, phones out, cameras ready, kids jittering backstage. Mr. Hargrove, the drama teacher, took the mic. His voice boomed. Next up, we have an original spoken word performance by Amia Cross and Trinity Hayes. The crowd stilled. A ripple ran through the room. Amia stepped out first, eyes locked ahead, focused. Trinity wheeled in behind her, back straight, calm. They rolled to center court, faced the crowd. And then, Amia began. "They told me quiet girls don't start revolutions." Her voice was crisp, bold. That silence was softness. That stillness was weakness. But I've seen storms in still water and watched thunder roll in on wheels. Without pause, Trinity continued. "I've been invisible and unavoidable, a punchline, a question mark. But now I am the period, at the end of your assumptions." Their words braided together like a song, not melody, but truth. And the gym, it was silent. Not one cough, not one buzz, just listening, just feeling. When the final line fell, there was a beat, a breath, and then thunderous applause, not polite, real. From the back of the room, Trinity's mother stood, hands over her mouth, tears in her eyes. Even Principal Gaines wiped the corner of his sleeve. And Camden? He didn't clap right away. He just watched as the girl he once knocked down now rose with fire beside her, unshaken, unapologetic, and seen. The final week of school moved like a dream. Lockers were emptied, desks wiped down, yearbooks filled with scribbles and inside jokes. And in the quiet corners of the library, something unexpected happened. Camden approached Trinity again. He stood a few feet away, his hands tucked in his pockets. "I heard you're going to Washington High next year," he said. Trinity looked up from her book, one eyebrow raised. "Yeah," she said. "Their special ed program's better." He nodded slowly. "You're gonna crush it." She didn't say thank you. She didn't need to. She smiled, and that was enough. Amia, on the other hand, would stay at Jefferson for one more year. They wouldn't see each other every day anymore. But before summer break began, they made a promise. A pact. They'd check in every Sunday. Keep writing, keep pushing, and never, ever let silence settle where truth belonged. That summer, Trinity and her mother took a road trip to Selma. They rolled, together, across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the same bridge her grandfather had marched across back in 1965. As they crossed it, her mother told her stories. Stories of courage, of struggle, of standing tall when the world tried to make you small. "You come from a long line of strong people," her mother said. "But remember, strength doesn't always shout." Trinity nodded, because now she understood. Back in Birmingham, Principal Gaines had his own plans for the fall. He invited Amia to co-lead the very first Student Diversity Council. "I need students with vision," he said, "with voice, and most importantly, with follow-through." Amia accepted. She already had ideas. New equity initiatives, peer mentorships, safe spaces for students who often went unheard. She wasn't done, not even close. When fall came, both schools felt different. At Washington High, Trinity found her place quickly. She joined the poetry club, shared her spoken word piece at the first open mic night. After she finished, a junior with green-dyed hair stood and hugged her. "I needed that," the girl whispered. At Jefferson, Amia led weekly student forums in room 204. It started small, 5 students, then 10, then 15. They talked about what mattered, what hurt, what helped. And high above the lockers, the school painted a new mural, designed by Amia, painted by students from all backgrounds. It showed 2 girls, one standing, one seated, both facing forward, eyes bold, unflinching. Above them, in block letters, were the words, "Respect doesn't ask permission." There was no plaque, no dedication ceremony, just the truth, spoken on a wall. And long after the paint began to fade, the story didn't. Teachers would stop with their new classes and say, "This is where it started." The courage, the change, the choice to stand up or sit tall. And every now and then a kid would ask, "What really happened that day?" And someone, maybe a teacher, maybe a student would answer, "That's the day a girl in a wheelchair was knocked down and another girl stood up." But the real lesson, the one that stuck, was this: real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it rolls, sometimes it waits, and sometimes, when the world is watching, it rises, together.